Hello, everybody, and welcome to the automotive advertising law in the United States. No, not in the United States. That's just me. Sorry. In the Americas presentation presented by the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance. We're going to get started real shortly. Thanks for attending and being a part of this great presentation. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself real quickly. I'm going to be moderating this panel. My name is Joseph Lewczak from Davis and Gilbert. And yeah, today we're going to be focusing on advertising law topics relating to automotive advertising, a pretty important topic, I think, certainly in the United States and throughout the world. And there's always issues surrounding the advertising of automobiles that are pretty unique, and there's various regulatory schemes in the countries that are selling automobiles, which is everywhere, I suspect. So we're going to dive into that in a second. I'm going to introduce our panel. A couple of bits of housekeeping. To the extent we can keep it interactive, great. We have a Q&A section in the chat here, so if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll try to answer those while we are going through the presentation live, if that works. If not, we'll wait till the end. Happy to do either one of those things. And then, yeah, I guess that's basically it. So why don't we get started? I will introduce the panel, and we're all on mute, or you are all on mute, but again, feel free to use the Q&A. So, as I said, my name is Joseph Lewczak from Davis and Gilbert. Joining us today we obviously can't address all of the Americas in terms of advertising automobiles, but we do have a smattering of countries that will be letting us know what the law is in their neck of the woods. So starting out with the United States, I'll lead that off, and then we'll go to Mexico with Jose Antonio from Arochi and Lindner, then Jaime from the Dominican Republic, followed by Carlos Alberto from Ecuador, and Evie Bouras from Canada. So yeah, let's get started. Thank you very much. Oh, the one other thing I want to mention, by the way, is about GALA, the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance, right? If you don't know what GALA is an association of advertising lawyers around the world. It's a really, really amazing group of people. All of the best advertising lawyers in the world, and we cover almost every single country. So if you are in-house counsel, or if you are at a firm that only has a single presence and you need advice for your clients in other countries, the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance is a really amazing resource for you. So we'll have some information at the tail end of the presentation. So check it out if you're not a member. Feel free to reach out to any of us, and we can help you along with that. So here are the speakers, and yeah, let's get started with the United States. And in the U.S., it does seem like really everything that's old is new again. And I think that's going to be sort of a repeated theme, certainly of what's going on in the US in terms of automobile advertising. What I wanted to focus on are some of the things that we've been struggling with recently, but also, again, reach back into the past, and that I see, clients and other advertisers sort of engaging in a way that is potentially problematic, or things that you should be aware of, and where we think that there might be additional enforcement activity. So I wanted to start out with demonstrations because it's a pretty important point. A lot of you may have seen this Nissan ad. This goes back to, I believe, 2014, involving the Nissan Frontier. And unfortunately, we don't have video, but this is a still shot from that, where we showed the Nissan Frontier pushing this dune buggy up a sand dune and over the lip of the sand dune. And the FTC investigated this commercial, and basically they were concerned about it. They said, that looks impossible. How can the Frontier really do that? And it turns out that, in fact, there was a tow rig attached to the dune buggy that helped pull it over the edge of that sand dune. And the FTC said, look, this is problematic. This is problematic because if it's a demonstration, it has to accurately reflect the vehicle's capabilities, right, without altering the vehicle or any of the other components of the demonstration, unless it is disclosed, right? You can't use camera techniques or other things that make a product, any product, let alone an automobile, appear to do something better, faster, more proficiently than it would. The FTC investigated this again, found out that there was a tow rig attached to this, and they wound up settling, right, another consent decree. This reaches back. You might be familiar with the Volvo case from the early 80s involving a similar situation in which a vehicle was altered to make it appear stronger and other vehicles to appear weaker than it was. So remember, when you're doing demonstrations, right, that they have to accurately reflect what the vehicle can do. Wanted to mention, just as a side note, you might see in this slide, this was the disclosure that was on the Nissan Spot: fictionalization, do not attempt, in an attempt to say, look, this isn't really happening, and the FTC wasn't buying that. So because motor vehicles really inherently are something that are almost always demonstrated in a television commercial or any video, always keep in mind that a demonstration is something that the regulators are going to be paying attention to and that you should be mindful of, right? Make sure it's accurate, make sure it accurately reflects what the vehicle can actually do. Second hot topic I want to address in the United States are disclosures and disclaimers. This is probably one of those universal topics that we should all be paying attention to as advertising lawyers, regardless of the product category. I do think that the trend here is that disclosures and disclaimers of material information are not clear and conspicuous enough. You all may realize, right, that the standard, at least in the US, is clear and conspicuous, right? Has to be large enough, on screen long enough for the consumer to be able to read and understand, and in close proximity to the claim it's attempting to explain or modify. But the trend is really, as we have this tension between creatives and lawyers, for the creatives to hide the disclaimers and the lawyers to want them to be more apparent, right? We end up with things like this, hyperlinks and mouse overs, where this is an older ad, a digital ad, banner ad, but you just have something that says, for example, view disclosure. And this is always a fight we have. The FTC has specifically said that hyperlinks that just say disclaimer or disclosure are never going to be sufficient from a clear and conspicuous standard. So think about how you can impact that and make it more clear to the consumers, right? One click away in many instances is going to be sufficient, right? But how do you convey to the consumer that there's important information at that hyperlink or that mouse over? So a disclaimer like view disclosures might not be sufficient, but one that says important lease information, click here, or just important lease information might be sufficient. I think we were also struggling really with how, especially in the category of leases and APR financing deals, there's a lot of information that needs to be disclosed to the consumer. We tend to lapse into following the network standards, relatively small scan lines on screen for a relatively short period of time. So think about that, right? Are those disclosures big enough? Can consumers really see them? To that point, here's an action by the FTC just a short while ago. You may recall, right, the FTC was sort of poking around at dealer advertising in the car industry. This is a $1.4 million settlement, right, relating to Norm Reeves dealerships, or the car group, where the FTC claimed the ad led consumers to believe they could pay $0 up front to lease a vehicle, when in fact the advertised amount here, right, $0 due at signing, excluded other substantial fees, probably things like down payments, tax, title, and license, etc. And what we're dealing with in the US is you have Regulation M and Regulation Z, which dictate what you have to disclose in a clear and conspicuous way to consumers as it relates to leasing or purchasing automobiles. And one of the most important things you can do there is to disclose the amount due at signing, right? And you can't just say $0 down payment, because that's misleading, because the down payment usually is just one component of the overall initial payment. So something that the regulators, pop in and out of on this in terms of activity. This was fairly recent. I think, we'll probably see more of that in the future. It's just something to pay attention to and watch out for. One of the newest hot topics that I think we're going to be seeing more of in the United States and probably elsewhere relates to aggressive driving. And again, wish I could show you the video, but this is a still clip from an ad that goes back 20 years at least relating to the Nissan 300ZX. And this is an interesting one, right? Because it showed the 300ZX sort of, racing other vehicles. First, it was racing a motorcycle and it was outpacing the motorcycle. Then it was racing a Formula One race car and it was outpacing that. And then finally, in this last scene, as you see here, it was racing a jet. And the point of the ad was, look, you could beat a jet. Now, clearly that's a fantasy, right? But it was definitely encouraging speeding and aggressive driving. And one of the things that make cars stand out, right, is the fun that you have driving them. And one way to make it seem like it's fun to drive a car is to show it doing things like donuts and, racing other vehicles. This Nissan ad actually resulted in an investigation, not by the FTC, but the Department of Justice. And so remember that when you are engaging in ads that show aggressive driving, there are two potential issues. One is a tort claim, right? Consumers replicating that behavior and then getting into accidents with the vehicle, right? These ads are usually exhibit number one in tort claims, where they'll show the ad to the jury and say, look, this is what my client saw. And they said, well, of course the car can do what is being shown in the ad. And then they got injured as a result of it. There's usually a quick settlement after that. Remember too, and this hasn't come up recently, but the FTC and other regulators could look at this as an unfair practice. The FTC has taken actions against other advertisers under their unfairness jurisdiction relating to showing activities that could have the potential of harming consumers. So as we as advertisers and car companies in particular try to stand out from the crowd and show vehicles engaged in aggressive driving, think about those things and think about how you might be able to mitigate the risk. A disclaimer like professional driver closed course may not be enough, right, to alleviate that risk, because that's probably contradicting the overall message that you're showing in any event. So aggressive driving, be careful about that. Another important topic that we're facing is consumer incentives and net pricing, and where we're seeing a lot of this really is in electronic vehicles, right? E-vehicles. This is a screen grab from the Tesla Model Y. And you'll see here an interesting thing, right? They list the price, and this is the default one, right? If you look at it closely, there's the purchase price right next to his potential savings, but you default to this page, long range, $46,690, asterisk, prices shown include $1,500 California clean fuel reward and potential incentives and gas savings for a total of $5,800, right? So Tesla here is trying to say, look, given the savings you can experience in gas, given these consumer rebates, given in some instances tax savings, your price could be as low as $46,690. Remember, in the United States, when state law is very specific on this point, when you advertise the price of the vehicle, it has to be the manufacturer's suggested retail price, excluding certain things, but generally not excluding these things like tax incentives or rebates or gas savings. And so there has been some poking around from a regulatory perspective on these practices. This was a letter that California sent out a couple of years ago, where they issued a warning to EV manufacturers. The manufacturers of EVs are advertising prices which are not the manufacturer's suggested retail price or cash price, but are a net price after deducting potential federal tax credit, California rebate, and other savings. These are false advertisements which mislead consumers and violate truth in advertising laws. So be careful about that. There's probably workarounds here in terms of advertising the MSRP, maybe doing some sort of a waterfall or other type of mechanism that shows deductions from the MSRP and then a net price at the end of it. Tesla has been engaging in some litigation relating to this. Seems to be going nowhere, but just pay attention to it. Something to look out for when your clients are engaging in price advertising or consumer incentives. And again, the consumer incentives may not be available to every consumer. That's an important thing to think about too. Lastly, before I turn it over to Jose in Mexico. I want to talk about self-driving vehicles, right? And this is something we're going to see a lot of, right? The future is not only electric, it's also about self-driving or components of self-driving, and vehicles being able to do things that we didn't anticipate them being able to do. This is a clip from a Cadillac ad from YouTube. So Sofia Vergara is actually driving. This is a demonstration of the vehicle's capabilities, and she's driving and putting on lipstick, right? And it's this extreme tension that we have here between showing the vehicle's actual capabilities. It sort of goes back to the first topic I was talking about, demonstrations, make sure the vehicle's doing what it can do and was designed to do. And that's doing it in real time and being shot practically. But also putting, consumers in harm's way potentially by engaging in activities that they shouldn't be engaging in while driving the vehicle. So question mark, this has not been a regulatory action, but should you be putting on lipstick while you're, quote, driving a car, even if it's a self-driving car? And what the manufacturers always say and what the safety experts always say is you must always be paying attention to what's going on in the road, right? Even if your hands aren't on the wheel or directly on the wheel, you have to be paying attention to what's going on around you and engaging with the vehicle. And being distracted always can lead to potentially accidents and other damages that the vehicle may not be able to adjust for. So again, unfairness potential there, also tort claims potential there, another thing to look out for. And again, I'm going to shift it over to Jose now, and but if you have questions while we're going through this, you don't have to wait to the end. Shoot it into the Q&A box on the right hand of your screen. But that's kind of it in the United States. Jose?
Thanks, Joe. Thank you very much for the invitation, for putting all of this together. Well, I'll be talking about Mexico. My name is Jose Antonio Arochi. I'm an associate at Arochi and Lindner, and like always, a pleasure to be part of this type of webinars. And for Gala, like Joe was mentioning, I think it's a great group, and it's a pleasure to speak with great attorneys that do this type of matters in a day-by-day. I want to start with Mexico, and my presentation won't be as complete as Joe's, because I say from a point of view, modernism has not arrived in Mexico in a way. All of the electric cars are not part of our day-to-day in Mexico. They exist, obviously, but it's not a culture. It's not like I'm in California, I'm in my car, and I go from San Francisco to Sacramento, and I can connect my car, and there's no problem. Here in Mexico, if you go from Mexico City to Acapulco and you go in a Tesla, I don't know if you're gonna make it, because I don't think there is I don't think we have the possibilities to have a electric car in a day-by-day, such as it happens in the United States. But I'll talk to you a little bit about advertising in a way. And first of all, how is advertising regulated in Mexico? To know about this, we have to know exactly what are the authorities that regulate this type of matters in Mexico. And from that on, we have to go and see on a case-by-case basis. I would see like consumer reviews would be an issue, but they are not very specialized or not very established, as Joe was speaking about the United States and the cases in a day-by-day. So what you have to do as an attorney in Mexico, and what you have to try to advise your client, is depending on the case, depending on the venue you will go. So Profeco is the Consumer Protection Agency. INPI is the Mexican PTO. We have the FGR, which is like an Attorney General's office. Then we have our judicial power, where we can see civil matters. And then we have CONAR, which is our auto-regulatory dependation, that we can use it in a day-by-day to educate the authorities, but their decisions are not binding, but we use it a lot for different cases. I don't have an actual case like they are in the United States, but I can tell you that there was a case that was settled in Profeco regarding consumer reviews and a company from Mexico, a local company that was renting cars in a day by day. For this reason, there is a norm in Mexico, and I will pass to the next slide. I want to talk what is a norm and its prime objective. A norm is a technical norm that regulates specific issues. So here is an example. If I am part of the Transport and Communications Secretariat in Mexico, and we have to see an automotive issue, they establish a norm which it goes through a legislative process and actually is a regulation that it's binding. But it's not a law per se. It's a norm, an official norm that regulates particular matters in a day by day. And there was a norm that was issued at the beginning of this year. Can we pass to the next slide, please? Which is the NOM 160 that talks about commercial practice and regulatory elements for the commercialization of new vehicles. At the end, this NOM was done because of the case that was seen and settled at Profeco. And at the end, and the people from Gala always laugh at me, but we are in diapers in Mexico. So we have to go through the consumer protection legislation. We have to go to the Mexican PTO legislation. But here you can see exactly the publicity must be clear, truthful, and sufficient for the consumer to make a decision that best suits its interests. This comes from Article 32 of the Protection Consumer Law in Mexico. It's just like summarized of the same, but it's established in the NOM 160. It has to be free of elements that may be misleading, like it's established in the consumer protection legislation. Obviously, it has to come in Spanish and with a currency of Mexico, which is pesos. And obviously provide enough information for an informed choice and enough for the consumer to make the decision that best suits their needs. Unfortunately, regarding automotive advertising, we don't have much in Mexico, so we have to go through the different venues. So we have Profeco, which is a consumer protection agency, and sometimes a particular case would be a consumer review that it becomes trending topic in the different platforms, and then the authority wants to see the case. It happens. They have a lot of work. There's few people working in this type of authorities. Then you may have as well the Mexican PTO for unlawful competition issues that comes with advertising. Then if you have a defamation issue, you go through the Attorney General's office. If you have a moral damage issue, you go through the civil venue. Then you have CONAR, like I was mentioning, that it's the auto regulatory authority that helps. And what we use CONAR, and I think Carlos and Jaime will tell you a little bit about Latin America. We have to educate the authorities. We have to show them what is happening, and we have to tell them the things that are happening in jurisdictions such as the United States or such as Canada, so we can educate them, because obviously things will come to our country, such as what is happening in the United States with the automotive industry. It will happen, and we will have a reality of electronic or electric cars in the future, but we have to be very conscious and educate the authorities. So I'm sorry that I don't talk to you a lot about what happens in Mexico, but I think you can have an idea of how is advertising regulated in Mexico. And the only thing that we have automotive is what I'm telling you, the NOM 160, which is a binding norm, but it was done because of an issue that happened at the Consumer Protection Agency, and hopefully we will have more things regulated in the near future. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you, Jose. A quick question for you.
Yes.
Given your diaper status, if you will.
Yeah.
How would I deal with advertising incentives or price or a lease of that or things of that nature, right? Is it I just advertise, here's the price and that's it? But what if there's a rebate or an incentive?
If it affects a consumer, the consumer has the possibility of going to the authority, which it would be the Consumer Protection Agency, And then if the Consumer Protector Agency wants to see the case, well, they'll go forward. If they don't think it's interesting enough, they'll just try to do something extrajudicial, and they'll go from there. But I understand perfectly that why you don't have that regulated, which because it's amazing how there are so many advertising day-to-day issues that happen. The actual authorities do not have the potential or the to see the day-to-day. There's not even guidelines regarding advertising, and now with all the influencer things and with all the pandemic, there should be guidelines to regulate what happens in a day-by-day, but there's nothing. We're trying to talk to the legislative authorities so we can have guidelines at the end of the year, so we can have something. Right. But hopefully,
yeah. So to a certain extent, looking at it from a comparison to the U.S., right? It's sort of like you had your general false and deceptive advertising law that says, you cannot engage in unfair or deceptive practices. Yeah. And it's sort of open to interpretation from there, and the various regulatory bodies will, take action.
But the thing is that in the United States, they actually prosecute the cases. If they actually do something that goes against what the law established, the authority prosecutes the cases. And here in Mexico, the problem is that, well, if it's a trending topic or if it's well known, well, the authority will go through. Like this weekend, just to put an example, we had governor elections and a lower chamber elections. So they hired influencers from Mexico to talk about, hey, vote for this party. And obviously it goes against electoral issues and advertising issues, but it was trending, and the authority has a case now because it was trending. But if it was just one influencer, it would have never arrived to the authorities. So the thing is that in Mexico, they do not prosecute the cases. You have to bring the cases to the authority, and you have to see what venue you go through. If it's a consumer protection case, if it's a Mexican PTO, because unlawful competition is seen in Mexican PTO, if even COFEPRIS, which is our Mexican FDA, if there is an automotive product sold by a company and it's established in the general health law that you have to have a permit from the Mexican FDA, and you publicize or advertise it without a permit, then you can have repercussions. But it's amazing how you have to be wiggling through the authorities.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jose. Appreciate it. And
thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah. And let's turn it over to Jaime, and who's going to tell us a little bit about the Dominican Republic.
That's good. Hola. My name is Jaime Angeles. I'm a partner in Angeles Pons in the Dominican Republic. And thank you, Gala. Thank you, Joseph, for putting together this panel. It's good for me, and next slide, please. It's good for me that I come after Mexico. And Jose Antonio, I think that explained everything for Latin America. What happens in Latin America, we don't have a special regulation for advertising in automobiles. As a matter of fact, we don't have a special regulation for advertising at all in many things, only unfair and misleading false advertising resolution, the special resolution for drafted by the Consumer Protection Agency. The Consumer Protection Agency in the Dominican Republic is more active. I think that what Jose Antonio was saying in Mexico, but still it's the same thing. It has to be like a very hard public thing to go forward. Interesting about what he was explaining, the influencers in politicals. In the Dominican Republic, we have to add a lot of bucks that goes with candidates and just to try to pursue people. Well, what we have in the screen is that form contracts has to go through the general legislation that must be registered and approved by the Consumer Protection Agency. And if there is a new car, in used cars, there are no form contracts. But for example, we have to say that the form could come in the warranties. And the warranty, if it's a form, it has to be cleared by the Consumer Protection Agency. And it is mandatory to deliver and give the consumer the warranty in Spanish. This is interesting to say because in the Dominican Republic, for example, for vehicles not sold through the authorized dealer that gives the service, the formal service, sometimes they have denied the service for new cars under warranty sold in another countries, parallel importation. But the Consumer Protection Agency is forcing and is pursuing these authorized dealers to give the service to all the customers. We have to say no environmental consumer protection regulations for green advertising. That's an issue. And I would like to just to mention that the electric cars sold in the Dominican Republic, we don't know if they complied with any rules because there are no specific regulations for selling those cars or what those cars should be doing. And we know that there might be a problem in the Dominican Republic if the dealers that are selling those cars do not provide the warranties that I was mentioned about. For example, in the Dominican Republic, we have Tesla vehicles, but we don't have a Tesla dealer. So there will be a problem with the warranty on that side. And also, I would like to mention just a quick thing that even before our law of consumer protection, we have had cases, legal cases, about liability on malfunction of the cars, and there has been liability up to the manufacturer, including the dealer. So, if you're going to buy a new car, the warranty should specify several things on that. Also, competition regulations apply. And as I said before, the Dominican Consumer Protection Agency has specific regulations for false and misleading advertising. Next slide, please. So what are the important regulations in automobiles in the Dominican Republic? I could say that we can divide them in three main aspects. First of all, the prohibition of importation. Second, the gain tax, that it's, I think it's the same thing in many places. And last but not least is the policy of the recalls and examination of cars. Next slide, please. So in the Dominican Republic, as in many places in the world, we have a very important problem of emissions. I say there is a study of that 70% of the emissions in the Dominican Republic are generated by motor vehicles in the Dominican Republic. And you can see that in the Dominican Republic, 70% of the units are older than 10 years, and more than 95% are 7 years older. So I think that many vehicles are getting older, that are going to get older than 10 years in a few couple of years. And I think this is a very real concern. So what has the authorities done? Well, there is a law that prohibit the importation of used cars more than 5 years old. But it is evident that that doesn't is good enough for what is happening in the Dominican Republic. It's interesting to mention that we have there is an exemption for heavy trucks that could be up to 50 years of use if it's more than 5 tons. So that you can imagine how the environment protection and biodiversity is not going to be accomplished. And also, it's excluded from the prohibition the hearses, ambulance, fire trucks, all the heavy construction equipments and crane trucks. So I think we have a problem there. Next slide, and I think that's the last one. And I wanted to mention the gain tax. Obviously, as it says, taxes on earth are always certain, and that's the only thing that's certain in the world. And we are not exclusive as a country that is mandatory to pay for the prices. But being in the Dominican Republic, maybe not as nice as Mexico, but it has been an issue. It has been an issue because when you have a raffle, and there are a lot of raffles in the Dominican Republic and promotions, and you get a car on that, who's going to pay the taxes? The law says that the organizer of the promotion or raffle should be sure that the tax is paid, so it has to be retained and paid to the tax agency. And what has been done in the last years is that the promoter, the advertiser, the people that is in charge of the raffle, of the promotion, is included in the rules that all taxes are covered. So to incentive people to buy the cars and all that. Obviously, if the people gets the price and the tax authority is not sure that all the paper has been done, the owner of the that has a new car cannot sell it there. I think that's all for the Dominican Republic, and thank you for watching. Oh,
excellent.
Sorry.
You're not done yet.
No. I'm sorry. And this is a very, very interesting thing that we have in the Dominican Republic, that all recalls and examination has been doing in a very friendly approach. So the brands, the automobiles brands, they have what they have assured with Proconsumidor, the Consumer Protection Agency, is that, wait, if there is a recall, if there is a problem, we are going to be together and we are going to explain to the public together. There are many examples, some examples on that. So the message is positive. And now, Joseph, the other slides, those are example of the publications that Proconsumidor and the brands have done. The other slide, and for sure, that's the last slide. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Jaime. Appreciate your presentation. And we'll turn it over to Carlos Alberto to talk about Ecuador. Carlos?
Thank you very much, Joseph and Gala, for the invitation. Well, regarding to Ecuador, Ecuador is not an exception. We do not have specific regulations on automotive advertising. Nevertheless, we do have specific regulations on automotives that would be applied to its advertising. And we do also apply the general rules, starting with the Constitution, in which we do have a set of principles regarding how ads or advertising activities should take place. And basically, I'm going to be referring to 4 of those principles, which are also included regarding consumer protection laws and in the Constitution as well, which is accuracy, truthfulness, clearness, and that any information provided on an ad or to the consumer should be complete. So starting with those, the first thing that we need to know is that according to our communication law, all advertising that's to be communicated in Ecuador must be produced locally. And if produced abroad, there's a certain set of rules that the producer must have a stock capital of Ecuadorian interests, private or public, and that at least 80% of the people involved in such production must be foreigners residing in Ecuador or Ecuadorians. So basically, if you want to produce advertising abroad, you're going to be flying most of the crew from Ecuador. Second of all, is that most of the issues that we have identified come from the dealers when they put together advertising pieces that may be in some way considered as misleading. For example, take it home today. We know that in Ecuador that's not possible because when you purchase a car, it needs to be registered. You need your license plates to be assigned. And after that, you're going to be given the car, and that's going to take from 3 to 5 days. Regarding I was forgetting, there was an issue right before, a few years ago, before the regulation on the local producing rule. There was an ad in which there was a scene in which they showed the inner side of the car. Specifically, there was the driver that was putting a soda can or a tea can on the cup holder, and it turns out that the colors of that soda, because it was produced abroad, matched the colors of a local beer. So it was understood that he was basically drinking a beer and driving a car. One could say that having the rule of producing all advertising locally would help avoid those type of issues, because that was a few months before this rule was adopted, which in fact it was not adopted because of that. It was adopted just to protect the local producing industry. Other claims that can be understood as misleading. Miles per gallon. There's a big thing about miles per gallon nowadays, that the prices of gas have increased because it is still cheap comparing to the US or Canada, but some of the prices of fuel have increased significantly, and now people are starting to worry. And there have been some claims before the consumer protection authorities regarding that the cars are not performing as advertised. Photo representation. It is very common to see that when a car is advertised, they put the lowest price for the most simple model. But in the picture, they show the full model of the high end with the sunroof, with the big LED screen, which is not according to the price that's advertised. Free registration, many times it's advertised that if you purchase the car, you will have the free registration fee, which in fact turns out it's not accurate, because what they do is they provide a discount on the price of the car, which is equal to the car registration fee, but you still have to pay the fee. So when you are asked to pay the fee, the consumers will claim and say that the ad was misleading, and it turns out that they have to specify that the proportional part of the registration fee was discounted from the price of the car. Free insurance should always specify the details, because usually it's limited to certain specific companies to provide such insurance. Sometimes it's just free for the first year, and that's not clearly stated. Sometimes the coverage is limited as well. So basically, you need to provide accurate, true, clear, and complete information on this subject, or if not provided within the ad, then provide the link or the source in which such information can be found. We do not go up to the, as in the US, and you, Joseph, mentioned that if you just put a disclaimer saying disclaimer for the consumer to click, it's also understood not enough. You just need to state additional coverage information, for example, in order for the consumer to understand that there's additional information regarding that free insurance or whatever it is included in the ad. Finally, the language. By law, it has to be in Spanish. All information provided has to be in Spanish. Nevertheless, you can use words or slogan in different languages, such as English, like the new old for a new model of a very well-known car, because it's not understood as relevant information for the consumer. But all the information for the consumer regarding the product must be provided in Spanish. And this comes up to the user's manual, which is not an advertising material, but there have been cases in which it has been claimed and ordered to have all the user's manual of the vehicle be in Spanish. Credit and financial details. If you state that you have to pay a monthly installment, then you need to provide specific information regarding as the interest rate, how many installments, or the number of months, if there are differentiated installments, etc. Or, as I mentioned, provide the link with the detailed information or the source where such information can be found. And that has to be included in the ad, whether it's a video or a static ad. Warranties, it's the same. You need to state the conditions about the warranties. For example, everything I'm talking about right now comes from our transportation industry law, which is not addressed to advertising, but applies to advertising when you put it together with the 4 principles I mentioned. For example, the fact that you will lose warranty if you do not perform the maintenance of the car with the dealer that sold the car, and things and details like that. It is also prohibited in Ecuador to import used vehicles and parts. There are several exceptions. If you've been living abroad for more than a year, you can bring it as part of your household, or the exception for heavy road or construction equipment or agricultural equipment. And finally, the use of minors in any ad piece for the industry, which, as any other ad piece on any industry, will require parental authorization and will always be subject to certain restrictions regarding the ages of the minors, and that are not included within other products as well. But basically, you could say that where the authorities put a lot of attention when you use minors is putting it together with another principle, which is that you should not display any situation that may be understood as unsafe or encouraging dangerous acts or situations. So basically, if it's a picture, you need to show the child wearing a seatbelt, because you won't know if the picture shows a car that's moving or not. And if it's a child that's under a certain age, it should not be using the seat belt, it should be using a car seat. So basically, we again come back to the 4 principles of information and advertising that should be accurate, true, clear, and complete. Because you need to understand that whatever you depict on an ad is considered a claim. So that claim needs to be true, complete, accurate, and should not display any situation in which you can be understood as encouraging unsafe or dangerous activities or ways of using the product. And I think that with that, I have kind of summarized what you could say about the automotive advertising industry in my country.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlos. Appreciate it. And we'll round it out with Canada and Evie. And Evie, I want to make sure you get in all your time. Just so if people can stick around and listen to what's going on in Canada, and then we'll stay around if you have questions. So Evie, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe. All right, so I'll start and I'll give you just an overview of what the applicable legislation you need to consider when you're dealing with automobile ads in Canada. So first off, the Competition Act, and this is our federal legislation. The regulator is known as the Competition Bureau, and this applies across Canada. So if you're advertising anything to anyone in Canada, you always have to have the Competition Act in mind. And this is kind of the founding legislation that instills the principle of no false or misleading representations to the public. And one thing I want to highlight, which will be relevant to automobile ads as well, is the drip pricing enforcement activity that we've been seeing from the Competition Bureau. So they've been focusing a lot on pricing claims. So what's drip pricing? So essentially, if you're going to advertise a product, a service, even a vehicle for $50, and then when the consumer goes to complete the purchase, you tack on all these mandatory fees that make it such that the person can't actually purchase the product for the advertised $50 price, the Competition Bureau has taken the stance that that's a false or misleading representation with regards to the price of the product. The person can't actually purchase the product for $50. So they have been enforcing that actively. And in terms of the fine that you can face when you're dealing with the Competition Bureau, it could be an administrative monetary penalty of up to $10 million. So it's definitely not something to ignore. We also have to consider at the provincial level. So each province has its own consumer protection statutes. Again, they kind of focus on the no false or misleading representations when you're selling it in the contract, when you're making representations. But they also have additional disclosures that you may want to consider, like when you're offering a warranty on a car, what you need to state in the warranty. If you're offering a premium, if you're offering installment payment plans, how you need to disclose that to consumers, that will vary by province. So you'll be mindful to take a look at each and every province when you are advertising a vehicle as well. And also within these statutes, you have the cost of credit disclosure requirements. Those are included in the Consumer Protection Acts in each province. Then you have the motor vehicle dealer legislation. So in some provinces, when you are selling or leasing a vehicle, you need to be registered as a dealer. So that's the case in BC, Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. So these provinces have their own advertising guidelines, their own regulator, their own enforcement powers, and these guidelines change pretty much almost very recently and very rapidly. And they are not harmonious across all provinces. Some provinces have more restrictive, more disclosures required in advertising, and some provinces don't. So again, you have to be mindful and take really a province by province approach when you are dealing with Canada. I also want to flag that certain dealer legislation doesn't distinguish between a manufacturer and a dealer. So it's possible that manufacturers may be subject to dealer legislation and then have to register and get a license. In terms of like the enforcement that we're looking at with these regulators, as an example, I'll use Ontario. So they're known as OMVIC. Let's say you have a false or misleading ad that doesn't meet the advertising or the dealer legislation guidelines. They can request that you take down the ad and post a corrective notice. They can also ask you to submit all your ads for a period of up to 2 years for pre-approval to them. You may also have to pay a $50,000 to $250,000 fine, disciplinary actions, and revoke your license. So really, they're not kidding around when it comes to vehicle advertising in Canada. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of the disclosures, this is just a handful of the disclosures that we're talking about if you're subject to dealer advertising in Canada. So obviously there's the identification, name, telephone, address, license number, and some provinces even require you to have a statement of this dealer holds an automotive business license. So that statement needs to be in the ad. If the motor vehicle is available for a limited time, you have to say that. What about if you're showing pictures and if that's not the specific vehicle that you'll actually be selling? You have to say that. If you're advertising certain features that are not available in the base model of the vehicle, you need to show the base model price and the price of the vehicle with all the additional features, and they have to be prominently disclosed in the ad. But I think more importantly, it's the concept of the all-in price. So when you're advertising the cash price of a vehicle, it has to be the price that the consumer is going to drive away the vehicle with. So that includes things like freight, inspection, administration fees, levies, documentation, dealer fees, essentially anything that's mandatory that you haven't given the consumer the express opportunity to decline, you have to include that in the price, and that would be the all-in price. There is an exception for provincial sales taxes. You don't have to include in the price. However, when you advertise your price, you have to state clearly and prominently that this price is exclusive of taxes. And what I mean by prominently is not in the fine print. It actually has to be in the body of the ad. Next slide, please. Oh, and then I also want to talk about cost of credit disclosures, and this is for credit. There's obviously some lease disclosures as well. I put up some points of the things that you need to include in your advertising, and this again is regulated by each province. I want to flag that this is mostly for the common law provinces. Quebec is its own separate beast that would warrant its own separate session. They do vary by province, so you'll have to include things like the APR, if there's any down payment, the installments. Some provinces have exceptions where they don't require you to put all of these disclosures in like TV or radio ads, but that's not the case across Canada. So if you're talking about BC and Manitoba, in your radio ad, you have to disclose all of these things when you're offering the vehicle for financing. I want to also pause on Quebec a little bit. The reason why it's so difficult to have national ads with cost of credit in Canada is because of Quebec. So the common law provinces have harmonized their cost of credit to try to be as similar as possible. But even at that, there's some differences. Quebec is still trying to catch up. And the main reason is that we have credit rate, which is calculated differently. So it makes it very difficult for you to have one ad across all provinces. So more likely than not, when you're talking about Canada, you're going to have to think about two ads, one for the rest of Canada and one for Quebec. Next slide. Oh, I also want to talk about fuel economy. Obviously, fuel economy is a material for consumers and it affects their purchasing decision. Everyone wants to know how much fuel we're actually spending. So these figures, when you're talking about the fuel economy of your car, they're based on Transport Canada testing figures known as EnerGuide. So kind of give you a sense of how this works. Some manufacturers of certain vehicles, not all, have to submit testing data to the regulator known as Natural Resources Canada. And the testing data is basically how did your vehicle perform when it was subject to all these conditions, when I was on and off brakes, when I took the air conditioning on? How much fuel did it spend converted in dollar amounts under city conditions and highway conditions? You put that data and you give it to Transport Canada. They then publish this data in a fuel consumption guide, and then consumers can look at it and compare between various models of how much fuel was actually spent to make their purchasing decision. So really, when you're talking about fuel economy, you have to be mindful, include, is this the city figure? Is this the highway figure? And kind of include the date of the publication as well. And the reason why date is important is because recently there was a shift in kind of how we test these things. So before model year 2015, we used to use a 2-cycle testing method. To give you a sense of how this works, you place a vehicle on a treadmill and you subject it to all kinds of conditions, and it gives you the fuel consumption. Transport Canada said the 2-cycle method is not reflective anymore. Let's jump to 5-cycle method. The reason why this is important is there's been a class action in Canada that was certified for $1.5 billion based on the fact that these vehicles against a large vehicle manufacturer that was advertising 2013 model year. So they weren't really subject to these new testing figures yet. But the plaintiff said that you were understating your fuel consumption figures and you failed to disclose that these figures are based on outdated fuel testing. So really what you're telling me is the fuel consumption that I'm going to spend is not accurate and doesn't reflect real world, even if in your disclaimer you're saying that these are based on Government of Canada testing figures. Please rely on the testing figures to find out more. The court said that wasn't enough. You can't rely on explanatory materials, and the consumer can't be told to look at other references to correct the general impression. So it was certified on that basis. Obviously, we're going to wait for the merits of the case to see what happens. But in the meantime, might as well disclose what the dates of the figures are in your advertising. Lastly, I'd like to close with the safety. So this is where ad standards come into play. Ad standards is our industry self-regulatory body, and they deal with the Canadian Code of Advertising. Again, principles like no false or misleading advertising, and then this safety clause as well that you need to consider. It applies to all advertising. So really, you shouldn't be showing advertising that might reasonably interpret to encourage unsafe or dangerous practices, including in driving. So, and all it takes is one complaint. So Ad Standards has also posted an advisory notice to kind of give advertisers a sense of what they are going to consider when they're dealing with a complaint under Clause 10. So they're going to ask themselves the questions: are you conveying the impression that it's accessible to exceed speed limits? So if you have a sign with 50 kilometers per hour as a speed limit and the car is zooming past that, more likely than not, you're encouraging someone to go over the speed limit. Is this a real life situation? Is it fantasy-like? Are people actually going to expect that this is going to be reproduced in real life? Are you cutting through traffic? Are you showing a disregard to lawful behavior? They will keep in mind the disclaimers like professional driver on a closed course, but they did say that that's not going to be enough to correct the general impression of the ad. So if you're really saying that you should drive this way, we encourage you to drive this way, you can't rely on the disclaimer to save you from a Clause 10 complaint. Kind of give you a sense of a recent case. There was a new design car that wanted to show off its automated braking feature, and there were scenes where they were cutting through corners and they were pedestrians at a corner, and then the passenger in the car had an alarm, had an alarming tone where they were kind of scared of what was going on. But it was really meant to feature this whole automatic braking option that was in the vehicle. And they had a disclaimer that said this was a professional driver closed course. Council of Ad Standards decided that that wasn't enough, and really you're showing a disregard to lawful driving, and you're encouraging people to take on this practice. And so the advertiser had to amend, or actually they amended before council reached a decision, but still it was upheld that it was a violation of Clause 10. So always keep in mind the Clause 10 safety when you're dealing with, when you're showing broadcast or TV ads of vehicles in Canada.
Awesome. Thank you, Evie. I want to go back to this fuel economy thing for a moment, because that sounded really scary to me.
Sure.
You mentioned billion with a B, I think, in
Yeah.
terms of the class action. And hopefully you're not giving any class action lawyers in the US any ideas, but was that based primarily on a failure to disclose the date when the tests occurred, and therefore the trend is to now disclose the dates? Or was it just the tests aren't as accurate in conveying what the expected consumer MPG might be, and therefore it's misleading, even with reference to other sources?
So it was a mix of both. It was a failure to disclose the dates, but more likely to disclose what the testing method was. So a plaintiff said that they didn't show that it was a 2-cycle test versus the 5, knowing that the transition to the 5-cycle was imminent, it was going to happen, and knowing that the 5-cycle test was actually more reflective of real-world driving conditions. So it was basically, and the court certified that that was fine because the consumer wouldn't know what these testings are, and you need to disclose it at that point. And it was certified on that basis. Now, again, whether that's going to be go forward based on merits, we're not sure. So that's why we're just taking this like cautionary approach to just tell consumers what the date is and the testing figure that you use for your model vehicle.
Yeah, and you have the example of what we would call the Monroney label in the United States, which goes on the side of the vehicle. But in terms of the advertising itself, is there kind of more are auto manufacturers being more cautious? Are they not advertising MPG at all? Or are they just being like really cautious and like huge disclaimer based upon, 5-cycle tests conducted in blah, 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 blah type of approach?
So obviously the best practice would be so now obviously when we have 2015 models, we're not really worried because they're all based on the 5-cycle test. And the best practice would be to have this snippet of the EnerGuide label right there in advertising as well, or just use what the data that you submitted to the federal government for natural resources and use that in your ads. And even the provinces require that now, that you disclose the city and the highway figures based on those testing figures anytime you mention fuel economy.
Got it. Okay. Well, I guess we'll be monitoring that case pretty closely. It's, I mean, like I said, it's pretty scary just in terms of the amounts.
Yeah.
And I guess that's against all the manufacturers or the ones that were advertising, at least based on those 2013 figures.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. Thank you to our panel so much. I appreciate all of your participating and providing us with all of your knowledge in your respective countries. We'll stay on for a few minutes for any additional questions, if there are any. In the meantime, just wanted to provide you with some additional information on Gala. Right, here's our next upcoming event, just a couple of days away, evolving environmental marketing regulation on June 17th, featuring a number of our members there. So check into that if you're interested or involved with environmental marketing at all. And then lastly, if you are not a member of Gala or need more information about Gala, please visit our website at galalaw.com. You can get contact information from all the panelists you see here today, as well as any of the other lawyers that are involved in Gala throughout the world. And then the Gala blog, it's a phenomenal resource. Really, if you need to stay on top of anything that is going on in advertising, marketing, or promotions law throughout the world, the Gala Law blog is an amazing resource because it is really bringing together all of the information from the various countries in one place, and really in a really great, easy to use format. So check that out and pay attention to that. But again, thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panel again, and thank you for everybody who joined. And again, any questions, let us know, but we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you, guys. Jaime, Carlos, Evie.
Hola, ciao. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great sharing the panel. Thank you very much.
Likewise, guys. Have a good one.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.